Chernobyl. The name is not merely a place. It is a timestamp. April 26, 1986, 1:23 a.m. The moment time fractured, reality shifted, and the world learned the terrifying cost of an unstable present. But deep beneath the concrete and steel of the crumbling sarcophagus, the colossal containment structure over Reactor 4, there was an even deeper, darker secret, a wound in spacetime that never truly healed. In 2021, a small, highly specialized team of Ukrainian technicians, conducting routine structural integrity tests on the flooded maintenance tunnels of the reactor complex, detected an anomaly. It wasn't seismic, thermal, or even standard radiation. It was a radio signal, an analog frequency, static-laced and weak, but undeniably present and persistent, emanating from the subterranean depths. Dr. Iryna Voronova, a radiophysicist and expert in signal degradation, was called in. Her initial analysis was baffling. The signal was broadcasting on a highly restricted 1980s Soviet military band, a frequency long since decommissioned. It carried an audio feed that was erratic, panicked, and overwhelmingly loud. Iryna's team risked several descents into the flooded tunnels, a maze of corroded pipework and concrete dripping with radioactive slurry. They used custom-built, heavily shielded probes to track the source. The signal grew exponentially stronger as they neared the heart of the structure. Finally, in a flooded maintenance chamber directly beneath the core of Reactor 4, they found it. It was a perfectly preserved, military-grade Soviet radio transmitter, circa 1985. It was completely submerged in the thick, black, highly radioactive water, stabilized on a corroded metal shelf, and it was actively broadcasting. The small indicator lights on its massive casing were glowing with a faint, sickly green hue, a clear visual sign of radiation-induced luminescence. The device was receiving no external power. It was running on an unknown, localized energy source. Iryna set up an armored receiver unit. Through the static and the crackle of the damaged frequency, she isolated the audio. It was a man's voice, frantic, choked with dust and panic, repeating the same words over and over. Pressure rising. Control rods stuck. We need water. Tell them. The core is open. The core is open. The accent, the terminology, the terror, it was a direct, live audio feed from inside the Reactor 4 control room at 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986. The disaster was happening now in real time, decades after it had occurred. Iryna's initial hypothesis was a radiation anomaly, a quantum echo caused by the unique isotopic composition of the elephant's foot, the corium formation beneath the reactor. But the signal was too stable, too high quality for a mere echo. It was a live broadcast. The transmitter wasn't picking up a residual sound wave. It was utilizing the catastrophic event of 1986, the immense, sudden release of energy and matter, to create a localized, sustained temporal inversion field. The intense radiation had warped the local spacetime, trapping the radio frequency in a perpetual 1986 loop, perpetually broadcasting the moment of its destruction. The transmitter was powered by this temporal energy itself, drawing on the past to fuel its present broadcast. Iryna spent weeks listening, meticulously documenting every sound, every muffled shout, every technical reading repeated in the control room. It was history made terrifyingly present. But the tapes revealed an anomaly within the anomaly. The broadcast, though perpetually 1986, was evolving. After days of continuous listening, the voice of the technician, a man named Dmitry, based on Iryna's careful cross-referencing, began to change. The static that accompanied the broadcast was not just interference. It was compressive energy. The more Iryna listened, the more the broadcast seemed to break down the time barrier. Dmitry's voice, still describing the 1986 events, began to incorporate new information. Names of people Iryna knew in 2021, technical details of equipment that hadn't been invented in 1986, and fragments of warnings that had no place in the past. Pressure rising. Control rods stuck. Static. Crackle. The fire will not stop it. Iryna. Static. Tell them the new sarcophagus is failing on the north wall. More static. The core is open. The broadcast wasn't just a record of the past. It was a terrifyingly active two-way temporal conduit. Dmitry, trapped in his 1986 loop, was somehow perceiving the future, Iryna's present, and trying to communicate with it. The terrifying reality dawned on Iryna. The transmitter, powered by the core's collapse, was creating a temporal loop, and Dmitry was actively using it to communicate. But the strain on the conduit was immense. The more future information Dmitry tried to push through, the more violently the localized spacetime reacted. The physical environment around Iryna's receiving station, 3 kilometers from the reactor, began to react. Her Geiger counter, once stable, started registering erratic, impossible spikes of radiation that lasted only milliseconds, pulses of past energy bleeding into the present. The thick, stagnant water in the flooded tunnels around the transmitter began to vibrate in precise, rhythmic waves, distorted by the immense energy exchange beneath the surface. Volumetric steam and fog filled the subterranean levels, the heat caused not by geothermal activity, but by the chaotic friction of spacetime compression. Iryna found Dmitry's final technical logbook in a long-discarded 1980s Soviet archive. The book, heavily coded, detailed a final, desperate theory. The reactor explosion, by breaching the fundamental structure of the matter, had accidentally created a device that could transmit audio across the temporal dimension. Dmitry and his colleagues, in the last minutes before death, had realized the disaster was larger than 1986. It was a multi-temporal event. Dmitry's last entry, written in shaky Cyrillic, stated, "We must warn them of the second collapse. Not the fire, but the silence after. The core is unstable. The future must not build their shield on a weak foundation. The signal must survive to tell them where the failure will be." The new sarcophagus, the colossal modern containment structure built in 2016, was not protecting them from the past fire. It was protecting them from the future collapse that Dmitry foresaw. The temporal distortion became unbearable. Iryna's equipment began to fail catastrophically. The modern spectral analyzer screen would flicker, briefly displaying the Cyrillic text of the 1986 equipment, a momentary physical regression of her own instruments. The submerged radio transmitter, visible through the reinforced probe camera, was now glowing with a blinding, chaotic yellow-green light. The water around it was violently boiling, not from heat, but from the frictional energy of temporal reversal. Iryna realized that Dmitry was desperately trying to send one final, critical piece of data. She filtered the chaotic audio, focusing on the moment the core ruptured. Amidst the screams and the cracking concrete, Dmitry's voice broke through, impossibly clear. "The weak point is level 0, not the roof. The floor. The floor. It is sinking, Iryna. The future is collapsing. Tell them the audio cut off in a deafening final wave of white noise, a sound that was pure temporal compression. Then silence. Absolute, crushing silence. Iryna rushed to the main reactor control room, ignoring the blaring alarms of her radiation sensors. She needed to verify the structural weakness. She reviewed the sensor data on the floor of the containment structure, level 0. It showed a recent, unexplained, and rapid subsidence on the north side, exactly where Dmitry had warned. The new sarcophagus was not failing from the outside. The ground beneath it, destabilized by the eternal internal warping of spacetime, was sinking. The Sunken Broadcast was not just a warning about the past. It was a live blueprint of the future collapse. Iryna's team sealed the maintenance tunnels with a triple layer of quick-setting polymer and lead, effectively starving the transmitter of the atmospheric energy it needed to maintain the temporal field. The official report mentioned structural fatigue and anomalous seismic activity. Iryna's findings about Dmitri's communication remained in heavily redacted, classified files. The threat was contained, but the experience left an indelible mark on Iryna. The incident was confirmed not by radio waves, but by a chilling physical change. The immense energy transfer had somehow magnetized the area around the reactor. Now, whenever Iryna uses any analog device, a tape recorder, a simple radio, the recording or broadcast is subtly warped. All audio is overlaid with a faint, persistent, low-frequency static that sounds exactly like Dmitri's terrified whispering. The temporal loop did not stop. It simply found a new, mobile host. Iryna realized that the warning was not just for the engineers. It was for her. She was meant to be the living archive, the human radio receiver. She left her job, unable to escape the constant, faint sound of a man dying in 1986. She knew the reactor's core was still sinking. She knew the second collapse was coming. And she knew that the Sunken Broadcast was not over. It was playing forever, and she was the only one left to hear the sound of the future disaster. The ultimate horror of Chernobyl is that the past refuses to be finished.